Hello, welcome to Aviation 101 with Laura. Today, I'm going to continue an occasional series where we talk about some almost disasters, so where an accident did not happen, yay, and how that ties to some regulations regarding Part 121, dispatchers, flight followers, and what in the world is a supplemental airline. This story came to me by way of this book, Humble Pie, When Math Goes Wrong in the Real World, by Matt Parker. Really good book. I recommend reading about it. He's got some math stories relating to aviation, and the one that really caught my attention has to do with the DC-8, which I finally figured out was registered as 812CK. Used to be for Kalitta Air, but then later was operating under American International Airways. Couple pictures. It's a nice looking airplane. Cool. So what happened with this airplane? Well, essentially, it had got loaded in kilos instead of pounds, but the crew thought it was loaded in pounds. So to go back, here is a NASA aviation safety report, anonymous report. So it's been scrubbed of all information, and I'll explain later how I figured out what the tail number was and what operation was actually doing this. But it was going from Miami to Venezuela, and this was in 1994. So on landing, the first officer made this report in the NASA safety database, and they were told that it was 43,328 pounds of cargo that they were taking down to Venezuela. Well, when they got where they were going, the captain wanted all the cargo to be weighed. But this didn't really happen because they didn't have any scales. There was language barriers. And so they ended up going back to Miami. The captain wanted an overweight landing inspection to be done. And honestly, this is like super sketch narrative. There's not very much detail here. So where did it go from here? Well, interesting. I learned in my aviation law class, if the FAA goes after somebody for breaking certain regulations, they can appeal, and they can appeal that decision to the National Transportation Safety Board. Who knew? Well, the National Transportation Safety Board has made public dockets of these cases. So I found this online. So this is from 1996. So you can see it's a little bit after that report. And here is, you can download this. I will link to it into video description, how I found it. But it is the NTSB order where the operator came back and did not like the decision of the FAA. So he appealed to the National Transportation Safety Board. This is Doyle Clifford Sanderlin. So let's kind of dive into this. Basically, it says that the NTSB did agree with what the FAA said, that there's a couple regulations that were being cited here. We have careless and reckless. Yay, 9113A. You can get that. Yep. You can basically get that from anything the FAA does not like. Okay. And then you have other items. So we have like the fact that they were supposed to do an overweight landing inspection. That's the 91403 thing. And then inspection personnel has to do with that overweight landing inspection. And you notice this little note on page 2 says respondent. That's the guy who is being basically appealing to the NTSB. He does not argue that any of these regulations is not applicable to him, as he is director of operations of American International Airways. Okay, so this guy, Doyle Clifford Sanderlin, appears to be the director of operations at AIA, or American International Airways. So what is the DO? Quick pause to talk about this. This is the director of operations, often called the DO for short. And if you look at 14 CFR, Part 121, supplemental rules say, let's go over there, that each certificate holder that is doing supplemental operations, they have to have the pilot in command, makes sense, and the director of operations jointly responsible for initiating, continuing, diverting, terminating any flights, and that is operational control. So then it says the director of operations may delegate the functions, but may not delegate the responsibility for the functions. Okay, so frequently the director of operations is going to delegate that function to people called flight followers. Obviously, we can't delegate the PIC's function because the PIC is flying the plane. But the director of operations is a person that the FAA says is responsible, along with the pilot in command, for the operation of each flight. Again, like one person cannot oversee every single thing, especially at a big company. So if the company is operating under supplemental rules, the DO typically delegates this to flight followers. Now, if you're like, what is this talking about? Well, most operations, a lot of operations in the US are conducted under 121 flag or 121 domestic. So I have a video about that, which I'll link to. But those operations have dispatchers, and that is who is jointly responsible and in authority with the pilot in command for operational control. But at a Part 121 supplemental, which this flight was being operated under, that means it was joint responsibility with the pilot in command and the director of operations. So when the NTSB is finding that the director of operations is responsible, that's why. Okay, they aren't actually going after the pilot in command in this legal briefing. They're actually going after the director of operations, as you can see right here at the bottom of this page. The respondent is the director of operations. So continuing on with what actually happened, we have this narrative saying the name of the pilot. Okay, so he is not the director of operations, but they were transporting cargo, and the FAA got a tip that the plane landed overweight. Okay. So then we have essentially said that they're pretty sure that the cargo weight was in kilos, not pounds, which would have made the aircraft over 30,000 pounds overweight on landing in Venezuela. That's crazy. The FAA had a lot of documentation, cargo manifest, weight and balance, other data. The captain saved everything. Smart. Okay. And basically, if they really had 40,000 kilos on board, that the aircraft landed way overweight. Way overweight when it got down to Venezuela, where it was going. And we even have some data about how the aircraft performed. So airplanes are not made to fly this heavy. And the captain submitted this report and somebody on the crew did the NASA report. But basically, the flight plan was introduced as an exhibit in this trial, saying that the climb was projected to be 30 minutes. It actually took an hour and 5 minutes. That's really weird. That's very evident of a heavy aircraft. Also, the fuel burn, they burned 53,600 pounds instead of 46,600 pounds. So that is a significant amount more fuel burned. The takeoff roll was sluggish. It took a long time to get off the ground. I guess good thing they were on a long runway at Miami, but it is very, very crazy. So the climb was long, the fuel burn was long, and even crazier, less than a month after the flight, this is not in the pages I have here, but the airline admitted to the FAA that the load plan was in kilos rather than pounds, and then they tried to take all that back from the FAA. Wow. The result was the NTSB found that the director of operations was responsible for this, and they ended up fining the director of operations $5,000. The NTSB denied the appeal. That was that. Then the director of operations had to pay the fine to the FAA, from what I understand. So, hope you guys learned a little lesson about the fact that, well, number one, a DC-8 apparently can carry a whole lot more weight than what it's supposed to be able to carry. Not good. Apparently, they were on a long runway. Good. If they had been on a shorter runway, this would have been a disaster. Also, the director of operations is a key person if you are looking at a Part 121 supplemental. A flight follower is also a key person, but the director of operations has the ultimate responsibility and cannot delegate that away. So, thanks for watching Aviation 101 with Laura. Be sure to go to my website, check out my merch, www.aviation101withlaura.com. Support the channel. Have a fantastic day.